Hi, Grandma here, and I'm reading The Midwife's Apprentice, Chapter 14, The Manor. Now, in the previous chapter, Visitors, we found that there had been several different visitors, including Will Russet, and there was also Jane had also visited. She had heard from Will that Alyce was working at the inn, and she pretended like she didn't see Alyce, and Alyce didn't talk to her, but Alyce overheard Jane talk about how she was disappointed in Alyce that she gave up and ran away rather than coming back and trying something else or learning how to do things better with the birth of the baby. The Manor. Just before the road from the inn turns and makes for the village, there's a hidden path to the manor. Visitors use the main manor road, crossing through the gatehouse and past the apple trees and the stable. Some of the villagers know about the path, but few use it, for it passes too close to the dark woods. Alyce, in her comings and goings through the village, had come upon the path, although she'd never known before that had need to follow it all the way up to the manor. Until one afternoon when golden yellow blossoms first appeared on the laburnum trees and Girdle the cow gave birth to her first calf, a sweet and sticky thing Alyce thought to call Rosebud, for she was as red as the hedge roses near the village church, where the manor blacksmith and his apprentices were hammering lumps of iron into shoes for horses. "The boy Edward?" she asked again. Her answer was rude remarks, laughter, and kissing sounds from men too ill-tempered or too busy or too tired to care about the questions of a strange girl. "The boy Edward," Alyce asked the kitchen maid, skinning a pig in the manor yard, the laundress boiling great kettles of goose fat for soap, the carpenters fashioning a coffin for old Ned, who had died that morning. None answered. "Corpus bones," said Alyce. "I might as well be asking a fence." Finally, she found her way to the shed that served as the manor kitchen, and there found a cook who, judging from the words pouring forth from her mouth, with none to listen, would not be reluctant to talk to Alyce. "Please, ma'am," said Alyce, who had learned that ma'ams and sirs serve her well, even with cooks and stable boys when asking favors. "Please, ma'am, the boy Edward, who came after harvest to help with the threshing, is he still here? Have you seen aught of him?" "Ah, the lamb," the cook cooed, waving her ladle at Alyce. "The little lamb. He be here, but too small he is to be swinging that great heavy flail, or wrestling with the oxen and plows and the taunting of the men, so I try to watch over him, the wee duckling, and find him simple tasks to do, suited for a small boy." The cook sat down, her face red from the heat and emotion and the boiling and stewing going on about her, took off one great leather shoe and used it to fan her face. She peered closely at Alyce. "Surely, then, you be the sister he talks about, for you look just like him and could pass for twins." The cook muttered, and crossing herself, "You not be twins?" she asked Alyce, peering closer. "I cannot abide twins." "No, ma'am, we be not even brother and sister." "Ah, never say that, sweet pudding, for you are as alike as two peas. Just so you are not twins." "No, ma'am, not twins," answered Alyce again, wondering why twin cows, such as Baldred and Bilworth, could be such a joy and a boon, while twin babies were ill-starred and unlucky. "Well, then, my little turnip, go find your brother in the hen house behind the barn, where I sent him to gather eggs for a parsley omelet, and bring yourselves back here for dinner of bread and bacon." The cook wiped her wet red face on her skirt, picked a struggling fly from the great pot of soup she was stirring, and began a new conversation with herself, for she found such talk interesting and hardly ever disagreed with what was being said. Well, this was a short read today, But the next chapter is a little bit longer and it's a little bit too much. But the next chapter is called Edward. So I think we can safely assume that we're going to find out how Edward is doing. And then looking ahead, we have another one called The Baby. So maybe Alyce has another chance to deliver a baby. And then the next chapter, chapter 17, is called The Midwife's Apprentice, where I get the idea that she is officially accepted back again, maybe. And then there's the last part, which is the author's note. And I'll be reading that when it's time. Maybe I'll read it now. Author's note. As long as there has been a woman giving birth and another to help her, there have been midwives. In developing countries today, most births take place in the hospital attended by doctors. This is not so throughout the world and certainly was not true in the past. Until the 20th century, the overwhelming majority of women giving birth did so at home attended by other women. The woman who made a profession of helping women in labor was called a midwife, from Middle English words meaning with woman. Sometimes the midwife was the oldest woman in the village or the one who had the most children. Sometimes a woman could get no other work because she was poor or ignorant or dirty, so she hired herself out as a midwife for women who could afford no other help. Lucky women were attended by a midwife with a deep commitment, skill, and training through experience or apprenticeship, and with patience, judgment, and clean hands. Different times and different places saw midwives differently, as almost doctors or almost witches. In medieval England, the midwifery was less than an honorable profession, mostly because it was practiced by and on women. Midwives worked unsupervised and unregulated into the 16th century, when Henry VIII's efforts to centralize and supervise the medical profession resulted in the registration and regulation of midwives. Medieval midwifery was a combination of common sense, herbal knowledge, and superstition, passed from woman to woman through oral tradition and apprenticeship. Things were done the way they had long been done, with little innovation or progress. This woman's knowledge was considered reliable and valuable, as illustrated in this book by the inclusion of Jane Sharp's information in Magister Rees's Great Encyclopedia. Midwives in general used their common sense to help the woman in labor relax, to comfort and soothe her physically and emotionally, to call on all the natural and magical agents at their disposal, and to assess when things were going badly. Some, like Jane Sharp, were experienced enough to know when and how to interfere. Others just tormented the struggling women with their meddling. Medieval common sense knew nothing of germs, little of anatomy, and all too much of magic and superstition. Herbs were the only medicine available to the medieval midwife. They were selected, picked, dried, and prepared according to ancient recipes and rituals, which took into consideration where and when the herbs were picked, what their leaves or flowers looked like or tasted like, and the influence of the ruling planets. Plants under the influence of Mars used to treat complaints of organs under the influence of Mars, which were usually ineffectual, as were those given to staunch blood or increase milk because their flowers looked like drops of blood or milk. But many herbs actually were effective, such as birthwort for inducing contractions, lady's mantle to stop bleeding, wormwood to relieve pain, and hops for their calming effect. The derivatives of some herbs used by midwives are used in medicine today. Belladonna to calm spasms and cramps, smut rye to stimulate uterine contractions, henbane and poppy for relief from pain. Superstitions included the use of relics, water from holy wells, charms, and magic words. Snail jelly for childbirth fever and eel liver to ease labor were considered useful, as were precious stones, notably jasper, emerald, and ruby, either held in the mother's hand or crushed into powder and mixed in wine. If these practices helped, it was not through magical intervention, but because of the calming and strengthening effect of the midwife and the mother's faith in their efficacy. No matter how skillful and conscientious she was, a midwife was really only of help in a normal delivery. No amount of magic stones or herbal syrups could correct a serious problem, such as a woman's small or deformed pelvis, or a child in a position making passage through the birth canal impossible. Many mothers and children died in childbirth during the Middle Ages, the result of poor nutrition and care, the number of unskilled midwives, and the inadequate state of medical knowledge. With the increased participation of doctors in the birth process, midwives fell into disrepute. But since the 1960s, there has been a renewed interest in midwifery in this country and elsewhere. The midwifery profession is now regulated and individual midwives are licensed. Today's midwives offer women much more than clean hands, magic stones, and stale jelly. Midwives can be men or women. Some are nurses also. Some deliver babies at home and others in hospitals. In France, a midwife is sage femme, wise woman. In Denmark, jordemoder, earth mother. Among the Yiddish-speaking Jews, fartsfrau, waiting woman. In Hawaii, palikiaki, protector of the child. Throughout the world, midwifery continues to exist among the medicine for women who choose to continue that tradition. So that is actually at the end of the book, but I thought maybe I'd read it now. And then I'll read chapter 15 about Edward later. Bye-bye.